You're listening to This Motorcycle Life, conversations about why we ride. Episode 31, Shoshin. I'm Bruce Philp, and thank you for listening. And thank you for putting up with my Japanese pronunciation. I'll explain that in a little while. There's a quote attributed to the late MotoGP rider Marco Simoncelli that I think of every time I see a sport bike, and it goes like this. You live more for 5 minutes going fast on a bike like that than other people do in all of their life. For me, this sums up the beauty of these machines, but it also sums up their sense of separateness from the rest of motorcycling's tribes. I've always wondered what those cliquey sport riders could possibly know that the rest of us don't. Well, in a moment, you're going to meet someone with an answer to that question, and it comes with an irresistible invitation. We'll get to that conversation shortly, but first, my customary housekeeping. Thank you again for all of your amazing emails since the last episode, and let me acknowledge a few here. Hello to Becky from the Bay Area, who thought that while Tom Harley was probably somebody that was hard to get to know, he was obviously worth the effort. Well, I agree. To Mike from the Boston area, who thinks we ought to organize a gathering of podcast guests and listeners, well, that would be amazing. Mike, I'm hoping to feature your gorgeous Buells in a future newsletter. Jason from Kingston, Ontario, I loved your insight about riding alone together. And a couple of new riders, Seb in the UK, who's also just done his first track day, and Neil from just down the road in Milton. Congratulations, Neil, on your M2. I hope that first big trip out west was everything you hoped for. And a special thanks to Wes Fleming of the Chasing the Horizon podcast for the shout-out on his last episode. You should check him out. He does some great interviews, but he's also one of the very few podcasts to offer well-reported motorcycle industry news. Now keep doing your thing, Wes, and thanks again. And finally, I wanted to say thank you to a couple of anonymous donors who recently gave to the Movember Foundation in the name of this podcast. This has been a challenging year for Movember, both because they depend on events to raise funds and because more people than ever need their help. I'd be so grateful if you gave what you can, either by clicking on the link in my show notes or supporting someone you know in this month's Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. I would love for the time and the money that goes into this podcast to do some good, and you can make that happen. Okay, here we go. One thing you learn as you get older is that there's a difference between wanting to do something and wishing you were the kind of person who did that thing. For me, that's sport bikes. On one hand, to be completely honest, there's really a limit to how much I enjoy speed. I like to ride with a lot of margin, and the only time my knee is probably ever going to be on the ground is when I'm checking my tire pressures. But on the other hand, there's something powerfully attractive about these purposeful machines. They're cool, and so is the way they sound and the way they move. And so are those leather suits people wear. And I'm not alone in thinking this. Earlier this year, a listener wrote to me to suggest that sport riding is one corner of motorcycle culture I've never talked about, and that maybe it's high time it got some love. So I decided to make a project of it. It started by signing up for my very first track day, which happened last month. Now, normally, if I'm not very good at something, I probably won't end up enjoying it very much, but that's not what happened here. I was not, in fact, very good at going fast on a racetrack, but to my amazement, I couldn't wipe the smile off my face all day. I thought this would be, in the words of David Foster Wallace, a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again. But I will, and I can't wait. And that only made me more curious. Part 2 was to find a guest who could put into words for me why that is. Well, that looked like it might be more of a challenge, until I discovered Red Spade. Red Spade is the social media handle for Anna Rigby, who shares her life as a self-described track addict with more than 200,000 followers on Instagram. Anna can ride. But in contrast to the typically reserved and performance-focused sport rider, she's also open and frank about the joy and pain of the commitment that comes with it, and about everything that it brings to her life. And happily, she was more than willing to share that in a conversation with me. And yes, she definitely had some answers. Now, towards the end of this interview, you're going to hear a lawnmower in the background. When something like this happens, normally I might consider cutting a segment or ask my guest to finish the conversation another day. Well, I'm sorry, but I didn't here. And when you hear Anna's infectious enthusiasm, well, I think you'll understand why. You might even want to sign up for a track day. I reached Anna Rigby working from home near Atlanta, Georgia. Good morning, Anna. How are you doing?
Hi, good morning. Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I appreciate you speaking with me. I've really been looking forward to this because what you do is kind of mysterious and cool to me. And so I really appreciate you giving us a peek inside that world. And, I've talked to people who've done all kinds of amazing things on bikes that I'll probably never come close to, but there is something special about your world. So as I say, I'm keen to kind of get into it. So why don't we start? When I was doing my research for this conversation, research is probably too grand a word, but I was surprised to find that you've been riding for, I think I've got this right, about 8 years. And the reason that struck me is because that's not like a lot longer than I've been riding, and I'm still kind of trying to find my way. And what you're doing seems so advanced to me and so focused. So I can't help but wonder how you got here. What was the path you followed over those years that turned you into a rider, and I guess that turned you into this kind of rider?
That's a good question. So 8 years. That's correct. And I actually don't consider myself like really skilled or advanced in riding. I still really feel like a beginner rider, to be honest. And the reason for that is I think I've always considered that riding a motorcycle, you have to be in tune with it, with your machine, and really get a good feeling for it and what the bike is doing under you. And believe it or not, it took me a solid 2.5 to almost 3 years to even feel that machine under me and feel one with it and know what it's doing. At the beginning, I felt so deft, and just I didn't even know what the bike was doing. And it was really frustrating. To be honest, I have zero natural talent and ability when it comes to riding. I could barely ride a bicycle. So the fact that I ride a motorcycle, it's funny. My mom always laughs. She can't believe that I ride now, but I do. But it's something that I kind of fell in love with. And once I got a taste for it, I went all in 110%. And I mean obsessive all in. So the way I actually got started into it was thanks to my husband. He has a history of riding. He used to ride dirt bikes as a kid, so he kind of has that natural ability and feel for it. Eventually, he got into riding sport bikes in our late 20s, and he bought himself a Blackbird, Honda Blackbird, which, it's more of a sport touring, but it had the racier fairings on it for the time. So it's a 1998 bike, and I started riding two-up with him. And I think he had it for 2 years with me riding two-up on the back. And after that, I was well, maybe I want to try this on my own. But I didn't know anybody. I didn't know any women that rode. It was only guys that I saw. Of course, going to racing, watching races. That was a really big inspirational focus for me. Because again, I didn't really know anyone that rode street a lot. So I got into it really by going to the track. And at the time I was into shooting photography. I did really like motorcycles, the way they looked, and not knowing really anything about, riding. That's kind of the only basis I had, what I saw on the racetrack. So that's kind of how I got inspired to really focus on the track side of riding. Just watching these guys, I remember the first time I saw them at the track, and they were all like knee down in a corner, and I was like, "What? I didn't know you could do that. Like, that's amazing." Like, again, like I really didn't, have any experience in that, so that blew my mind. And I actually did a 2-up at Barber before I could really even ride a motorcycle on my own. But again, I had been a passenger for a few years, and my friend at the time took me 2-up on his Ducati, and that was the beginning of everything. That was one of those defining moments in my life where it blew my mind so much that I was like, I want to learn to do this no matter what it takes. And it was a really hard road. I actually started on a CBR 250
Sure.
R. I had, and I still do, I have a neurological condition where my legs are in a lot of pain all the time. And it's something that I deal with all the time. It doesn't go away. It's something I'll probably have forever. And at the time when I got into riding, I was figuring out the medication, how to manage that. And again, the medication just helps it, like, so I can function, but it doesn't cure it in any way. So it was really hard to learn. Like, I remember the first year I couldn't really shift by flicking up my toes. So the guy that taught me to ride at the MSF course, he told me about shifting with my heel. So I always wore racing boots so that I could do that, and it wouldn't hurt as much. But as you can imagine, on a little twitchy bike like a CBR 250, shifting with your heel and just kicking your leg off the peg like that really unsettles the bike. So it was a really interesting thing that I had to overcome. But again, not knowing anything about bikes, not riding ever anything before, it was all a new mess to me. So I was just trying to make sense of it. So that's kind of how I got started in it. Ever since then, it's like I always just wanted to really focus on the racing aspect of it. My husband actually went on to race Wera for a couple of years. Unfortunately, we had to take a break from that, due to financials and other things, but hopefully he'll be back. And I've always wanted just as a bucket list to try my hand in it as well. I don't have any major aspirations to, go crazy fast or win. But I do, the few times I have gotten to race mock races, a couple dirt bikes at the Texas Tornado Boot Camp. I've worked with Shalina Moreta. She actually signed me up for a flat track race once. And, all those like little experiences that I had like blew my mind and made me feel something completely different that, unless you are put in that situation, you'll never experience in your life. And I want to feel that again. So I kind of want to try my hand at racing still. Hopefully next season that will happen, but we shall see. COVID's kind of thrown everybody's lifestyles upside down right now.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. So this was love at first sight. Like, you didn't dabble in, adventure bikes or cafe racers. This was, you just knew it instantly. And I'm wondering, this is probably an unfair question, but you said at one point that you'd gone for a ride on the back of a bike with someone who was pretty good, and it blew your mind. And I'm wondering if you can tell me a little more about that feeling. What was it that actually blew your mind?
So we got on the back of my buddy's Ducati, and a little back seat on those little sport bikes are, well, it's almost non-existent. You're basically getting worn like a backpack by the pilot.
Right.
And it was just crazy. Like every corner we were, he was knee down every corner with me on the back, and just it felt like I was, I don't know, freedom, like it was the speed, everything. It was overwhelming freedom and just feeling alive in that moment. Like nothing else mattered. Like you're just focusing on that next corner, and what you're having to do with your body. And of course, as a passenger, it's a lot easier. You're not controlling anything. You're just there for the ride.
Mm.
And at the time, not knowing how to ride, like that was mind blowing to me. It's definitely a lot different being a passenger on a racetrack than on the street. It's obviously a lot faster. It's way more aggressive. You're really getting tossed around, and it takes a lot of effort to hang on back there, especially considering you don't really want to suffocate the pilot. You can't be grabbing on them. So you got to learn how to hang on to the tank and grip your legs under a tailpipe. You do whatever you can to hang on for dear life. And it's so exhilarating. It was just something completely different. I'd never expected to be doing anything like that. But it honestly made me feel alive. Like I came back like almost in tears of joy, like experiencing something otherworldly until I had, I've never experienced before. And it's kind of important to note too, that this all happened when I had turned 30. So, I wasn't in my 20s. I wasn't a kid when I got into this. I already have a lot of self-preservation in me through the years. And,
Right.
and I was never a risk taker either. So this was something so just out of the norm for me that it's like a drug, man. When they say like track is crack, they're not kidding.
You're right.
It's beyond addicting. And I got addicted to it. I went full in 110%.
Yeah, I see that. It's funny. And actually, we'll come back to that sort of track is crack thing rings true for me. But you said you were 30 when you did this, and you said that you're a risk averse person. Now, I've been invited once to ride on the back of a motorcycle, being ridden by an extremely accomplished former professional racer, like a legit guy. Long story, but the important thing about this story is I said no, thank you, because it looked terrifying to me. So what made you do this? Is this the kind of thing you do, or what made you throw a leg over the back of that bike?
I wanted to experience what the closest possible thing, what it was, because I wanted to try this, to do this myself, right? Like I wanted to learn to ride. But I didn't really, I wanted to see if this was something that would even interest me, or if it would just terrify me to death, and I wouldn't want to do it. So that's why I tried it. It was with a trusted family friend, which again, trusting to get on the back with someone to do something like that. For me, that was huge. Like till then, I'd only trusted to get on the back with my husband. And even that, I still remember our first ride. I was very apprehensive, because you're putting your life in someone else's hands, and they're responsible for you, not just for themselves. I've always taken riding very seriously, which is why my whole thing is always, safety first and be smart about it, gear up, do whatever you can and minimize your risks.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely getting on with someone else was like on one hand, it was very uncomfortable mentally because I wasn't, happy putting my life in someone else's hands. But, when it started going, and it felt right, And it's funny you mentioned that you had the opportunity to do that as well. And I wish you had taken it, because it's, it doesn't have to be as terrifying. I mean, the pilot's going to go as fast as you want them to go. And they can feel when you're comfortable or not, which but it's just such a great experience. And, ever since I've done my very first two up on track, before I even knew how to ride, I've recently done a lot more. Actually, I've ridden two up with Jason Pridmore quite a few times. Always felt really comfortable with him. And I recently did one with Chris Ulrich at Barber, which was really fun because I asked him to scare the piss out of me and go as fast as he possibly could with a two-up.
Oh my God.
And he did. I think we did. He said we did 138, which I knew it got serious when he gave everyone else two-up rides. And then when it came my turn, he brought out his tire tech guys and they adjusted a little bit on the suspension and made sure everything was solid. And as soon as we literally rolled out of hot pit, it was full send. I don't think my rear touched the back seat of that bike at all. It was endo into every corner and wheelie out of every corner. It was pretty insane. And that pace, after now years of riding that track, I am mentally not ready for that.
Wow.
Like it blew my mind. That was probably the fastest I'll ever go around a racetrack on a motorcycle, just because I don't think physically I can do that myself, but it was amazing.
Wow. And never say never. It's funny. You talked about, you never touched the saddle. So I've watched some of your videos and, obviously, and to me, so two things strike me about watching you ride. One is that it looks very athletic to me. You're sort of constantly, in motion, sort of dancing with that machine. And the other is you don't look self-taught to me. It looks to me like you've had a very disciplined learning process. Can you talk a bit about that? How did you actually learn to be the rider you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I'm very flattered that you even made that observation. No one's ever said that before. So that's pretty cool. So about a year after I started riding, I finally felt confident enough that I'm going to try my first track day. I rode with a few organizations, and then I found my way to Sport Bike Track Time. And they actually have a really awesome program where when you sign up as a novice rider, they actually have classroom sessions between almost every single session. So there's 7 20-minute sessions a day, and they start you out in the classroom and they teach you the basics, everything from flags, which is extremely important. That's your communication around the track, so that you know what's coming up. They talk about proper lines, proper track etiquette, which is something, that's huge. Riding track etiquette is huge, I think, and it keeps everyone really safe. Body positioning, learning how to figure out your bike and how to place your feet, how much pressure or not to put into your bars. Anyways, it's like the basics of track riding. They actually teach this to you. And as long as you're a novice, you take those classes and they kind of like beat that into your mind. And then there's, you get a coach sometimes it's like 5 people to a coach, which is really great. That's a really small group. And if you want extra help, they'll work with you. So I've ridden with them from the beginning, and I was actually a novice for probably 2 years. I refused to move up. I just wasn't comfortable. I was not confident at all. And that's fine. And they let me play in there and work in there. And I was extremely slow for my first few years. So it's funny, being slow, you get to focus on other things. And I worked with specific coaches. Like I have my favorite coaches for different things. Like one guy taught me body positioning. Another guy taught me corner entry, corner pace, exit, like all those different, like I learned specific things from different people. At the same time, I took the Jason Pridmore, his star race school. I had the pleasure of taking that twice with him. I worked a lot with Jason DeSalvo, who we're actually, we got to be great friends now. But I definitely had a lot of training from a lot of racers that I've become friends with that have kind of taken me under their wing and helped me out here and there. So I definitely have them to thank for like a really structured and rigorous like teaching schedule. Like they've, I'll show up at a track day or something and I'll have someone take me under their wing and work with me for half the day. And that's huge. That really taught me a lot. And it's not just like showing me what to do, but also working with me for my abilities, for my pace, for, again, to work around my minor disability of like what I can and can't do with my legs, because things hurt. So it's like, well, how do you load the pegs if if you're hurting and stuff like that? They worked with me and around my issues. So that's really helpful. And because I had I've been doing this for a few years now, it kind of gets really ingrained in you and it's muscle memory at this point for me. Like I don't ever think about body positioning or things like that. It just naturally happens. So it makes riding a lot easier now.
So it's been a constant process. You didn't just go to racing school and then go and race. This feels to me like something, it's like a martial art. It's like you just never stop studying it. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, absolutely. That's like 100% true. I think that's what I really love about this sport in particular is there is no like limit to getting better and better. And like, there is no goal to reach. I mean, even Mark Marquez, hasn't he's still getting better and better.
Yeah.
It's, I feel like I'm so low on that totem pole. Like I'm literally just scratching the surface. The more I learn, the more I realize just how much more there is to learn. And it's incredibly physical too. I'm limited by my physicality. Like I was at track actually on Monday for the first time since April. This is probably the longest time I haven't been on track, like in between. I generally try to go every month, but due to COVID. And unfortunately, I had allowed myself to gain some weight and just completely let myself go physically. So when I went to track on Monday, it was painfully visible to me how out of shape and how much I was struggling. Like mentally, I had so much more to give, but physically, my body was just screaming at me in every corner. It felt like my legs were on fire. Like I was just doing squats and push-ups like nonstop. So it's insanely physical of a sport. And, and then you add to that the G-forces of and all the elevation changes and everything, that the bike is pulling you around. And then you realize the bike is riding you and not the other way around. Right. So, yeah. So definitely have a little bit of work to do to get back to it.
Well, if there's a bottom of the ladder, that's probably where I am, which I'll come back to. I have a question about Red Spade, about this persona. Who is she and how did that happen?
So it's a funny question to answer for me. So I actually started like the whole online handle Red Spade a little bit before I learned how to ride, but I was already riding 2-up with my husband. And initially the concept was I wanted a catchy name that was memorable but easy. At the same time, red spades don't exist. It's kind of like an enigma. So in the beginning, it was just a catchy name. It didn't really have a meaning. As I got into riding and I was really documenting my journey, like this whole like red spade thing came about as my husband started racing. We decided, actually a lot of people are saying, why don't you start, a race team and call it that. And like everyone really liked the name online as I was gaining more popularity. It was just a fun name. And I think once we started the business and started Red Spade Racing, and I really was, putting out a lot of info out there, and people were getting to know both of us. It kind of took on its own form and personality. Like I don't feel like I'm not Red Spade. Like Red Spade is just a concept to me, an idea. I think anyone can be that. And that was the whole point of my social media feed, was just sharing the struggles and the everyday stories of getting into riding and what people struggle with. And, for a lot of people, it comes easy. Like I have a lot of male friends that are amazing. They started riding way after I started riding, and I introduced them to track, and now they're racing and killing it. Like they're amazing. But there's also a lot of people that struggle like me, or, beginner riders. So for me, the goal was to share honest information about riding, everything from how amazing and fun and freeing it is to also how dangerous it is. Because, let's be real. People die on motorcycles every day. Mm-hmm. Of course, you could slip in a shower and drown and die too, but pick your poison. But, I wanted it to be something that everyone could relate to. And then, in the beginning, I used to also track a lot of racers and share their stories as well. Unfortunately, I don't get to do that as much anymore these days. I would like to get back to that, though. Same with my photography. I used to shoot a lot of racing and club level races and stuff like that. And even went and shot some MotoGP, which was a blast. Wow. Some SBK and stuff. I had some awesome opportunities to get out there on track and do this stuff. And I just wanted to share that joy that I was having doing this with other people and inspire them. And it caught on. I get so many messages all the time about, everything from thanks for sharing this little tidbit about gear. Or I remember when I shared my most recent crash on the street, it was really embarrassing for me, for example, to share something like that, right? I knew it. I get flamed for it online. But you know what? I had people reach out to me and thank me for sharing it and talking about the topic, because they were new riders. They were not aware that this was something they had to be careful about or consider. It just, as long as it made some people stop and think and helped them along their journey, then to me, that's worth it. That's the only reason, I do it, is if it inspires someone else, then I'll keep doing it. So.
Yeah, which I think you do. The funny thing is, I don't get a sense of struggle. I've in your Instagram feed in particular, I see lots of honesty and transparency, but I don't. You come across as someone who's striving but confident. I think it's cool to understand that a little bit better. So just to kind of situate you in people's minds, tell me just a little bit about your motorcycle life right now. What are you riding and where are you riding?
So right now, I have two CBR 600 RRs, actually. They're both 2008. So same exact make and model, but one is completely decked out, my race bike. It's, it sits in the garage, only gets taken out for track. And my other one is plain street bike. It's completely stock, except I put rear sets on it just to, I was scraping pegs too much in the mountains. So it's the only thing I did to it. But it's actually really nice having the same two bikes, because if something happens to either, I could always take off parts. However, after modifying my track bike so much now, it honestly feels like a completely different machine. It's definitely a lot more powerful. It's tuned. It has a way more aggressive setup and seating position. So it doesn't even feel like my street bike feels like a donkey compared to the track bike, which honestly is the way it should be. It's, you don't need something super crazy for the street, and I also have a little Z125, which I love to train on that thing. After I recently crashed my street bike, I'm kind of waiting on parts. So I took it apart and it's sitting in pieces in the garage. So I've really been playing on my Z for the last almost 7 weeks. And I got to tell you, I actually don't miss the big bike. Like, if you got friends to play on little bikes with, oh, they're so much fun. It's just such a fun little machine because, it's a lot more fun to ride a slow little bike to its like full potential than, slowly ride a big bike.
Right.
I know there's a saying that goes that way, but it's really true. Like there's something to be said about being able to like really thrash around a little bike. I would love to add more to the stable, but right now we don't have room and financially,
Right.
we're kind of, waiting. Everyone's in limbo right now.
Yeah.
But I've gotten to ride a lot of naked bikes over the last probably 2 years. And I got to tell you, I fell in love. I love sport bikes because they're sexy, they're sleek, they feel amazing, but they're very hard to ride in comparison to naked upright bikes, at least for me personally. I have a much easier time with the nakeds. And they're honestly just as fun. It's a little bit different, but it's still, I still have a massive smile on my face. So
yeah.
Maybe I'll add that to the stable later. I definitely would love to have more and more bikes. I'd love something like a DRC or, to thrash around in like really tight corners in the mountains. I'd love to get an adventure tour one day, for the travel. There's so many things that I do want to do on bikes, but when you're focused in so like directly into one thing, like let's say like track riding, it's hard to do anything else because it takes so much of your focus, and 2, it's expensive. I mean, financially, to be able to do that, it's a huge sacrifice. Like, we don't do anything else. It all revolves around track. So I think like eventually when I pass on from that and go on to the next thing in my life, then I'll trade out for something else. And it could be dirt bikes. It could be anything. I want to try it all, to be honest.
Yeah, right. Yeah, me too. And I guess that where you live must have a huge impact on that. I mean, you've got amazing roads in the Southeast and amazing places to dirt bike too, from what I understand. But, I might have asked you, why did you like a super sport as opposed to a leader bike? But knowing where you live, it's actually not surprising to me. Is that a fair, am I making a fair connection there?
Yes, absolutely. For sure. It's a fun place to have one. Like I live like 15 minutes north of Atlanta. So I'm in the suburbs, I'm in the country. I'm really close to the mountains, and right actually where we live, if you go north, you start with probably one of the biggest collections in all of the United States of just amazing twisty roads, everything from like sweepers and big, nice, big wide corners to really tight switchbacks and fun stuff. So, you can pick whatever you, honestly, I mean, you can ride anything there. Like I said, I feel like sometimes I do better on a smaller bike or something upright than a super sport in some of the tighter stuff, but it's a good challenge. It forces me to really slow down and learn and face my fears. Like, for example, I have a bit of a fear of heights. So whenever I'm on those roads that literally the right side of the road just drops off into a cliff, like it took me a long time, like a lot of nerve, like I had to work up a lot of nerves to go ride those roads. And now to ride those roads at a spirited pace, like, that it definitely took a lot of practice for me, mental practice more than anything, to be okay with doing that. But yeah, we have some amazing stuff. And, I've ridden out on the West Coast as well. And it's crazy because there's a huge difference in the type of roads and the scenery out there as well. And there's amazing roads everywhere, but I definitely feel blessed for being where we live right now. Like just the whole grouping of the scenery and the roads here is really awesome. And they're nice quality too, which is great.
Yeah.
Like I lived in Boston for a long time, and the roads up there, again, because of winter, they're not the greatest. They're
right.
constant in they got to be repaired constantly, and there's potholes everywhere. But here in the South, it's definitely a little bit nicer, smoother. You can have a little bit more fun with less fear.
Yeah. Yeah, it sure looks like it. I haven't been. I've ridden west, but not where you are. But it's definitely on the list. So I got maybe a year or so ago, I got an email from a listener who thought that it was time that I did an episode about sport riding and about sport bikes, and she thought that was kind of a gap in the, in the series, if you like. So it sort of raised two questions that I wanted to ask you. And the first one, I guess, is what do you think that gap is? So I've talked to adventure riders and people who've gone around the world and people who love Harley Davidsons and people who are into custom bikes and, lots of, the people in this world are, the motorcycle world are just endlessly fascinating. What do you think what do you think is missing from those perspectives that talking to a sport rider gives us? What do you have to say about motorcycling that nobody else can?
That's a good one. It makes me think of why I want a sport bike to begin with. But it's funny because I think there's like a stigma when it comes to sport bike riders. I feel like I know, at least when I tell people that I ride a motorcycle, and when they ask what kind, and I say a sport bike, they're all like, "Oh, you're that type of rider." And I'm like, "Whoa, what do you mean that type of rider?"
Yeah.
And I feel like sport bike riders almost get a really bad rap because, they're sport bikes. They're meant to go fast. And again, that's probably why I have a hard time on a sport bike in slower areas and really tighter corners. I'm not as confident with my bike as I would be like on a naked, because sport bikes just want to go fast. They feel better and perform better the faster you ride them. And they're meant to do that. I mean, sitting at a red light, on a sport bike is utterly miserable. It is the most hottest machine ever. Like, I don't know how people ride them like in no gear, because even if I'm in jeans on my sport bike at a red light, I come home and I have burns on my legs. Like, I have heat burns. So anyways, and here in Atlanta, there's a lot of guys that go around, our perimeter, and they'll, split traffic at like 170 on their big bikes. And, it's just, I get it. Car drivers hate that because it terrifies everyone. So, and then you get into the mountains and we're up there, we're riding around probably, I hate to admit it, but, at least 30 miles over the speed limit, we're dragging knees, and it looks really aggressive, and it probably scares a lot of the people. So I personally try not to, scare other riders, cyclists, car drivers. Like, I'll go out there and have my fun and stuff, but I try to be really cautious of who I do it around, because again, I don't want to give off that bad vibe either and scare people. Cause that's the thing. People don't understand. Like, if you don't ride a motorcycle, you don't know, really anything about that lifestyle and what it is. So I get why people, have this kind of negative opinion regarding sport bikes, and I even had a friend at work ask me, like, well, don't you get like bored of riding the track like over and over and over the same track? And I'm like, well, that's a good question. No, I do not, because every time I'm working on something different, I'm focusing on getting better at something. And like we had mentioned earlier, there's no limit to getting better at riding a motorcycle. So I feel like with sport bike riders, there's also two different segments. There's your regular, which is regular. Well, it's your majority of the rider, right? That will buy a sport bike and ride it on the street. And generally, you end up, testing its limits and riding it way too fast for conditions and getting in trouble on
Right.
that. And then there's the few of us that are, fortunate enough to go to track. Unfortunately, I'm not going to lie, track is really expensive. It takes a lot out of you financially, and it's not, most people can't afford it. So I would never fault anyone for not being able to do it. But it really is truly the best way to learn your machine and to test yourself and your bike, your skill sets in a safe environment. But I get it. It's not everyone can do that. So I think that's like a big difference where sport bikes almost like tease you to get in trouble. I mean, it's definitely, it's a crazy machine that, everyone wants to tame when they own one. And I think the riding style then is a little bit different than, let's say, when you're on an adventure tour, you're there, you're looking around at the scenery, you're going a lot slower. I mean, especially Harley riders, for instance. I mean, it's funny here in the mountains, there's like a love-hate relationship between Harley riders and sport bikes, because they're out there doing the speed limit or less, going around a corner, doing like 20 miles an hour, enjoying the scenery. And that's absolutely wonderful. And then, I come up behind them and I'm about to keel over because, 20 miles an hour on a sport bike, you're pretty much falling over and it's really hot.
Right.
And that's not why I'm there. I'm there to enjoy the road, not the scenery. So it's a little bit different. And it's the thing, I'm not trying to get from point A to B faster. I'm trying to enjoy my A to B, just in a little bit different manner than the Harley rider, the adventure tour does. So it's definitely, for me, it's an adrenaline rush. That's why I ride a sport bike, for sure.
Yeah. 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 That's a great answer. And actually you ended up answering my second question too, which was, I was going to ask you, why has it been so hard for me to figure out, someone I could talk to about this, because I have this impression that sport riders kind of keep to themselves a bit. I was at the Rock Store last year in Malibu and was passed by a bunch of guys on sport bikes who were going the same place that I was. And when I caught up with them and we were all there, everybody was kind of standing around talking to each other, except for the sport bike guys who were like off in the corner, like nerds at a dance, kind of. and I always kind of wonder, like why are they like, what's the insularity all about? And I think you've just explained it, that there's this stigma, and I guess that just makes you self-conscious. I think I have my answer. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a big truth to that. But I also believe that's very regional. I did notice that when I was out in California that there is a bit of that. And perhaps it's the same here. But I personally don't feel it as much because I have friends that ride all types of bikes. So we all, I guess in our area where we ride, we all get along and we pretty much talk to everyone. But I can see where some sport bike riders, would, if they have a bad rap for doing stuff like that, they would feel, they wouldn't, like you said, a duck's at a dance. They wouldn't come out so much, and join the other riders. I mean, definitely, like, I guess it also comes down to what you have in common in, to talk about. Let's say if you're, riding, definitely there's not much in common with riding a sport bike and riding a Harley, right? Like completely different styles.
Yeah,
so unless you have friends that overlap in those sections, you're not really going to reach out to be friends, with that, because it's just different. And not only that, but generally they don't ride together for those same reasons that we just discussed earlier. So yeah, perhaps there's definitely something to that.
Well, it was interesting. It wasn't offensive at all. It was just more like a kind of, nobody else kind of gets us sort of vibe, as opposed to, tribalism or whatever. That's cool. That's really smart. I never thought of it that way. So I personally have this weird relationship with sport bikes because I love their purposefulness and I love the way they look. But as a rider, I don't have the aggression that I imagine it takes to ride one well. Never mind the talent. But a couple of years ago, I think I mentioned this when we were speaking earlier. A couple of years ago, I interviewed Freddie Spencer, and I was totally starstruck by the kind of meditative perspective he had about riding at speed. He was all about flow and presence. There was none of this final assault on the Death Star stuff, right? It was all about intensely being in the moment. And I was just dazzled by that. And I see this a little bit in your videos. I think maybe signaled by the music that you choose sometimes. But I'm wondering if you can talk to me about that a bit, to take us inside your helmet on a great ride. Is it final assault on the Death Star, or are you meditating out there?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, total meditating. It's funny you bring up Freddie, because I love watching Freddie race. It's incredible. With those guys are on a completely different level, than what I'm doing. I'm honestly, if we're going to compare, I am literally putzing around the racetrack, smelling the flowers on the infield compared to what those guys are doing.
Right.
But with that said, regardless of how much slower I am doing, the same motions that they are, for me, I'm doing it at my 100%. Just like whatever they're feeling. So it all comes down to that flow state. Like I believe that's probably what Freddie was talking about. Like when he's in his helmet, it's very meditative. It's flow state. You're literally not thinking about anything but that next corner and what you need to do to just push harder and faster. And when you get into that type of a focus, it literally, you feel so alive doing that. And it almost is this weird blend of meditation and an adrenaline rush. And I got to tell you that's that addicting. That's why I think we do what we do on sport bikes on track. I wouldn't say I ever feel that on the street. On the street, I have to consider so many things that could go wrong, which completely break my flow state. I'm thinking about debris, cars, what's around that blind corner that I can't see. On track, there is none of that. I can fully and just openly trust that I can go 110%. And if something happens, it's either because I ran out of my own talent or I had a mechanical. And both of those things are on me. And that's fine. But, for the most part, I can fully just meditate out there. And to your point, it's really all we do. We think about like that next corner and what we have to do just to go a little bit faster. So for me, for example, I lack corner entry speed. For example, I want to get better at entering a corner faster. So keeping that throttle wide open to the last possible moment where I can then get on the brakes and tip the bike in and trail it into the apex and then stand it up and get it out as fast as possible again, without disturbing the bike, letting it do its thing. Also managing my tires, feeling for a slide, you don't want to, I don't have any electronics on my bike right now. So I don't have any traction control. So if I do something too aggressively, I can high side myself. I've crashed on track before. Fortunately, nothing crazy. I never got, really, really injured. But the more you push, the harder you go. That's going to happen. That's just part of it. Like crashing is part of riding track and racing.
Yeah.
So it's those things, but it's managing all those things. And, when you go into that corner and you pushed a little harder than you did before, sometimes you scare yourself. And that's really a cool moment too, because you'll get like that adrenaline spike, like, oh my God, that was way faster than I anticipated. But you know what? I didn't die. So let's do that again and let that become the norm. So It's all about constantly pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, and just to get faster and faster and smooth and predictable and just mastering that corner, and you never really master it. You can just go faster and faster, especially compared to seeing, other guys. I know I have 10 seconds on the table to gain on the entire track. That's a lot of time, a lot. I mean, for the average person, 10 seconds seems like nothing, but for me, that's an eternity. So it's crazy what you can do with that in your mind. It's all mind too. It's so mental.
Yeah. Yeah, that sure seems to be the case. And I think that must be part of the appeal. You have one video in particular on YouTube called "Let Me Take You for a Ride," and I'm curious to know, because the video was shot on the road, not on the track. I'm curious to know what you were sharing with us there. What was what did you want to show us?
Just the fun of the road. It's a road that I really like to ride on. For me, it's an easy road at that piece to do. Easy because I've ridden it so many times. So I'm very familiar with it. And I just I like the scenery of it. I like the flow of it. It's got a nice set of corners. And for me, it is meditative and very enjoyable to be on that road. So that day I was having a really good day riding, and I just wanted to share that, kind of hopefully show a perspective. I've got that Insta 360 camera that does a lovely 360 view. So it shows a lot more than my previous, videos that I could share. So that's just kind of it. Just wanting to take my viewers for a ride with me.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. I mean, I didn't want to read too much into it, but as I say that, there's this assumption about sport riding that it's all about, kind of being a ground-bound fighter jet, and you're kind of on the attack all the time. And your sort of take on it, at least as I understand it through the media, is way more kind of well, we've used this word meditative a bunch of times, so maybe it's the best word, but it just struck me as kind of fresh and inviting, if you like, as a way to think about riding like that. And I just wondered how much intention there was there. Have you ever had a perfect ride?
Yeah, it's something of...
Oh, go ahead.
For me, it's all about like that feeling. So when you hit a corner just right, where you feel like the bike is almost, I don't know, it's like it's like a knife cutting through butter, and you're just like, that lean is perfect. Everything, like the gyroscopics of everything just feels solid. Like your head is in the right place. Your body is in the right place. The bike is reacting properly. The suspension is like perfectly compressing and releasing. And the tire, you can feel it flex and push but you also feel that grip, and the road, you feel connected. That to me is a perfect corner. I don't hit all my corners with that feeling. I'm trying to think of like the percentage. I mean, I probably hit them like 70%, out of 100 that way. But when you hit it just perfectly like that, and then if you repeatedly hit, from corner to corner, if you get in a chicane, back and forth rhythm, that is like nirvana. So that can be. That's why I guess I say it's meditative. It's weird because nothing about riding a sport bike fast is is delicate, right?
Right.
But when you string together those corners, it does feel smooth and very satisfying. So I guess that's where it is. It's like this crazy balance of, yes, you're on this vibrating hot machine that really is probably the closest thing, you know, as normal people can get to like a fighter jet, like you said, and that feeling, but it can be calming. It's a different adrenaline rush, you know, like like I said, I'm scared of heights, so I will never skydive. I get uncomfortable being that high up, stuff like that. Like I can't see myself doing that, or bungee jumping, or any of that. That adrenaline rush to me is like I've done like the bungee jumping thing a few times when I was younger, and I guess I was more tolerant of it back then. But that spike in adrenaline is not as controlled as what I feel when I ride. But again, you know, I'm still not at the limit, at the edge, like you said, like Freddie and all those guys are. You know, when they're on track going into a corner, that bike is all out of whack under them. They're just on that limit, on that ragged edge.
Yeah.
I'd like to get to that, and that's my goal. I want to, you know, just in the last couple of years, I'm making my bike scream on track, you know, like I'm always riding it right at the, you know, rev limiter and figuring that out, figuring what gear I have to be and at what moment and shifting. It's so important just to get the most power out of that engine. It's so important, but I'm not, you know, standing up the rear going into a corner yet. I'm not sliding that back end. I would love to one day maybe, but I'm not there yet. So for me, yes, it is a little bit calmer and more meditative, and especially on the street. Like I said, on the street, for me, it's all about being smooth and calm. Yes, you know, I'll drop a knee down onto the ground, but it's nowhere near as aggressive as it is on the track. Like I said, on the track, I have no abandon. I'm going for it. On the street, it's very controlled. You know, it's very controlled.
Yeah, actually, I was curious about that. This is kind of a geeky question, and I'll just apologize now that I had my very first track experience a couple weeks ago. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about myself so much. So, apologies to the.
Congratulations! No, I got to I want to hear your experience, your first track experience. That's awesome.
Well, we might.
I live for that stuff.
It was. I haven't had so much fun in a long time, which I'll come back to in a couple minutes. But I wanted to ask you a specific question about what you were just talking about. So, when I first started the podcast, I did an episode on cornering, and I talked to a guy named Todd Egan, who you may or may not know. He's a West Coast guy and precision rider and a former racer. And one of the pieces of advice that he had for street riding was, he said, you know, the further down the road you look, the slower things will seem to happen. And it's been a very durable piece of advice. It seems to have helped a lot of people, and it's really smart. So at the track, I was kind of unnerved to be told that, no, you actually don't want to be on the track. You don't want to be looking much further ahead than the next thing you have to do. So the next entry point, the next braking point, the next apex, which makes things happen fast in your mind. And so I guess my question is, how do you get used to that? And what is your state of mind to be processing information so quickly? Or at least that's how it seemed to me. What's that like?
So, yes. So honestly, it's all about stringing together a series of actions that you're doing, right? Which vision, what he talked about, that is like literally the number one thing. If your eyes are not far out enough, everything is coming at you way too fast, way too overwhelming. You can't make the corner properly, and you overslow the bike. The further you're looking, the better it is. So it's funny, in all of my photos, like I almost look like I'm looking at the photographer every time. Some of them, yes, I am. I'm totally totally trolling and just doing it up for the gram. But when I'm on a really fast lap, I notice that too. My head is going through the photographer that's standing, somewhere in the corner, really close to the track. And I'm actually looking past him so far, like up the exit. So for me, like the further I look, the better it is. And yes, obviously you have to identify your breaking point, your tipping point, apex and all that. But you look through that really quick. You want to be looking as far as you can, within reason, to make that corner. I feel it's the same way on the street, especially in like really tight situations. So this is something I've been struggling with the last few months, actually, on the street, especially after my crash. I'm having like a hard time getting over this one, which is really weird because it was a very, very controlled and to me, minor crash. It was a very simple low side. I didn't even get hurt. I mean, it was this. If you're going to crash, this is the way to crash. Like, it was like one of the best crashes I've ever had.
Right.
But oddly enough, even though it was so fine and I got back up and I rode, a month afterwards, I actually started feeling worse on the street. I had this like fear, and my eyesight, I noticed, started going very close to where I was looking right in front of the bike. Like I would look at my tip-in into the corner and I wouldn't go past it. So that, of course, would freak me out. I'd overslow and would just, it was feeling terrible, especially on a technical road, let's say like the Dragon at Deals Gap.
Right.
I don't know if you're familiar with that one. That's one of our favorited roads here, kind of like a rite of passage thing. That like every rider comes to here. And I was struggling on that road because while it is mostly blind, it's very tight corners, but I wasn't allowing my eyesight to go up further, and it was killing me. I mean, it made it very uncomfortable. So it's definitely important to, like, vision is everything in riding on a motorcycle. And I mean, I would assume that goes for no matter what type of motorcycle you're riding.
Yeah, I think that's true. I talked to last summer a psychologist who rides named Mark Barnes, and he said this thing that just stuck with me. He said that the art of motorcycling it lies in the ability to direct your attention, and I just thought that was so incredibly wise, and that's sort of what I hear you, saying. I was gonna ask you about your crash a little bit later on, and maybe we will talk about it again. But I just wanted to grab the anecdote you just shared, about kind of tensing up in corners in the aftermath, and I wondered whether that was part of the reason why you've been riding minis. Now, I think you just told me that also your bike's down, so there hasn't been a lot of choice. But there's a bit of a tradition in sport riding of training on very small bikes. It turns out I did not know this, and so I was curious to know what is that doing for you? Is it apart from being fun, or maybe that's the point? How's it helping?
Yeah, no, that's totally true. A lot of track sport bike riders and racers will actually tell you to start riding little bikes. And I don't mean just like little, like the little mini, but like the R3, for example, is huge right now amongst racers. The smaller the bike, the twitchier it is, right? Like your inputs have to be extremely precise. A little too much of an input like really impacts the bike, where like on a larger bike, it doesn't. You can get away with a lot more at a regular pace. Like race pace, that's a totally different story. But the little bikes really teach you body control and movement, and you have to be so precise with them. The little bike that I have, the Z125. So yes, I've been riding it because right now it's my only two wheels on the street, but I would have probably gone back to it after the crash regardless if I had my if my big bike was up and running. The way I finally got comfortable on my big bike the last couple of years was actually from training and riding the Mini. There's, like for the most part, you're still carrying the same corner speed on the Mini as I do on the big bike. I mean, I got to tell you, there's nothing more satisfying than coming up under a rider on the mountain that's on a big bike, and I'm on this little 100, 25cc machine, and it's like, oh, hi, excuse me, coming through. Like, it's funny because it's, they may be on a 600 or whatever, but honestly, in the corner, for the most part, in tight corners, you're all going to carry the same pace.
Yeah.
So it's all about corner entry and maintaining that. So the little bikes, for example, like in the mountains, you cannot mess up on that bike. Like you can't lift, you can't brake. Like if it doesn't have enough power, especially going uphill, to regain that pace. So it's excellent training in kind of facing your fears and entering a corner at an appropriate pace. So like it forces you to, for me especially, it forced me to really get out of my comfort zone. I mean, the bigger the CC, the bigger the engine you have on your motorcycle, the more you can cheat, the more you can be lazy with it. The reason why I will not I won't own a 1000 cc on track is because it would completely destroy any progressive learning that I'm doing. I could just lazily enter a corner slowly and just power out of it. And to me, that's not what track riding is about. I'll do that on the street all day long, but not on the track. I actually feel I hindered myself really early on because when I had my 250, I converted it to a track bike. Then I think a year after tracking that, I made the mistake of taking my 600 to Barber. I thought that maybe my 250 would struggle there because it's very elevated and it's a nice wide track, fast track, or fast-ish, not medium pace. But you can hit 130 and stuff, at a regular track day. And I thought that my bike would just struggle on the hill, so I took my 600. Well, the problem with that was I loved the power of the 600 so much because, again, on the street, up until then, I never really unleashed it. I didn't really know how to ride it aggressively. When I got a taste of that on track, I didn't want anything to do with the 250 anymore because it wasn't fun for me anymore.
Right.
I realized I liked the power, but in turn, it hindered my growth on the bike. That bike had a lot more to teach me. And I mean, I consciously made that decision. I don't regret it, but it is what it is. And I guess I always knew I'm not going to be a racer or anything like that. I'm not going to be getting podiums. So and the whole goal of riding for me is to have fun. So I consciously made that decision. I'm having more fun on the 600, even though I can't ride it to its potential. And, there's things that the 250 still can teach me, but I made that decision, kind of wearily, I am going to be stunting my growth here, but whatever. But, so with that, yes, I highly recommend small bikes, especially for starting out. If you're serious about really wanting to learn how to ride, really well and corner well, smaller bikes are the way to go for sure. With that said, would I ever own a 1000? Absolutely. Sure. There are fun toys. I think we should own whatever inspires us and we love, because I mean, in the end, they're toys, they're fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Although, I'll say I agree with you completely about small bikes. And I think that I wish that the media would stop calling them beginner bikes because of exactly what you say. I mean,
I agree.
Of the bikes that I have in my barn, the bigger they are, the easier they are to ride, actually, is the truth of it. Let's get back to your crash for a second. So I recall you posted a video of that low side, and I think it had you commented something about cold tires. But the thing the thing that struck me about it was I was still laboring under this kind of prejudice, if you like, that sport riding is a bit is kind of competitive and in big quotation marks, macho, let's say. And so I was struck by your choice to share that.
Yes.
200,000 people were going to see that post.
Yeah.
Why not just keep that to yourself? Given the culture of the sport, what compelled you to share that experience?
So, like I said before, I share everything on my feed regarding riding, the good and the bad. The recent last couple of years, I've had a lot of success in riding and I've been growing. But before that, I had a lot of lows and I have shared those as well. I've shared other crashes. This one was like the first crash that I actually managed to happen to be recording and recorded it. And, nothing happened, nothing bad happened, but it was a crash on the street, which I thought would be beneficial to share, like I said, with new riders and the less experienced people. I knew instantly that sharing this, I would just get ripped a new one. And I actually ended up turning off the commentary on it because people were just leaving really, really dumb comments.
Sorry.
And clearly nobody trusted that I actually knew what happened. So everyone had their own opinion.
Yeah.
The video also went viral. But you know what they say? Even bad publicity is good publicity. So even though a lot of places reshared the video and it went viral and it got a lot of, haters coming out of the woodwork, I actually, I think it did a lot of good because I did see a lot of people also learning from it. And that's really all that mattered to me. And in the end of the day, it's whatever, if I can't share that, then what's the point? I'm not here to impress anybody, you're right. Riding a sport bike, especially it definitely brings out that macho, but I don't know, maybe that's a guy thing. I don't really feel that, especially in my group, I ride with I'm very, very fortunate to have a lot of girlfriends that ride. And they are my closest friends. I'm sure my social media feed is littered with photos of all of us. So I definitely, I feel I have a huge support group. So that's why sharing something like that, I'm you know what? It happens to us all. And the fact that I beat myself up for it because that accident should have not happened. I knew damn well that the tire was cold. I even made a comment to my two friends that were with me. And I couldn't believe that I just took off and, and it's funny, I was telling my husband, I was it's almost I wasn't sure where that level was anymore. I haven't ridden on cold tires in so many years. You got to remember, on track, I'm on tire warmers, right? So I have full confidence. I know that it's full sun mode. You
Right.
Don't warm anything up off tire warmers. When I generally ride on the street, the last few years, I've literally been riding in prime conditions, where it's in the middle of the day, hot pavement. I mean, I'm already riding. The tires are grippy. Even if I take a break, they're sitting in the sun. I check them, everything's good. This was one of the situations where it was 7:30 in the evening. I think the temps were something that it was just above 65 degrees. There was no more sun on the pavement on that side of the mountain. So there was still plenty of daylight, but there was no more heat in the pavement. We had pulled over on an overlook, and the overlook is right in the middle of, an aggressive part of the mountain, but a fast part of it. So generally I'm very comfortable going through there at a very spirited pace, knee down. So third, I literally pulled off the overlook, one corner, second corner, and then that third corner, I literally just felt I was feeling too confident and I asked way too much of the tire. So a part of that is, I was cocky. I wasn't really respecting the tire and the grip the grip that it was lacking that I knew it. At the time I was on that's actually a track day tire, it is street legal. It is DOT rated, but it needs to be warmed up and then it's like glue. But it's been sitting for 30 minutes in the shade. It was completely cold and I just requested too much of it. And then insult to injury, as I hit the apex, instead of just like, I already knew in my mind, I'm like, I'm carrying way too much corners, like lean angle here. Like my knee was like right there. I could feel just how much I was off, leaning the bike. And like an idiot, I just got on the gas ever so slightly more. Instead of maintenance throttling it and standing the bike up and just, then continuing like, all right, this is all you need to do. No, I added just a little bit of gas, and that's when the rear end just totally slid out from under me and we went sideways. So
right.
It's a classic thing. And the reason why I know exactly what the bike was doing and what I was feeling and what I did is because I do this on track all the time. On track, you're managing that. I am sliding my rear in a corner and I know just how much I can do that. But on the street, that's a completely different thing. So, I know a lot of people also commented that it looked like there was something on the road. I'm like, no, I've run over that patch a million times. It just looks like it. Like I cannot blame the road on this one. So,
well,
so that was unfortunate.
Yeah, but I mean, you made the most of it. I think probably people got a lot out of it. I mean, I have to confess, I watched it after, right after it happened because you're in my feed, but I also watched it before I had my my Virgin Track Day, and I'll tell you why. There were two reasons. One was that it was good to be reminded that that this is a possibility, but the other thing was the bike just kind of laid you down. And I thought, okay, in a controlled situation, I'm not going to explode into a ball of fire. If the worst happens, I'll probably be okay. And that was actually super helpful to me. So I don't know if any of the hotshots that were commenting on that thread made that point, but you did some good. Why don't we?
Well, I'm excited to hear that.
Well, it's sincere. Why don't we talk about this a little bit with people in mind who might be interested in riding this way but haven't before. So the next few questions are kind of coming from there, if you like. And one sort of touches on something we've already talked about a bit. You have said, you've been very open about your, the development, needs that you think you have as a rider, and pretty modest, I would say, about your talents. I look at the way you ride and I go, man, I'd give anything to be able to ride like that. And so there's this gap, and I think out of that comes this point that sport riding is obsessed with continuous improvement, that maybe is kind of at the heart of it. Do you want to talk some more about that? Is that a fair statement? If I'm sitting at home listening to this podcast and I'm thinking, man, it would be fun to go to a track day, is that part of what I'm buying into?
Yes. So for sure, track riding, and again, you don't need to necessarily be on a sport bike to go to track, especially not in the beginning. Like if it's something that you're interested in trying and seeing if it's for you, like you do not need all the specialized stuff that, that racers have. You don't need all the electronics. You don't need a, expensive, crazy sport bike. It really is, track riding is about learning to find out your limits and then finding out how much you can push them. It's finding out how to properly ride your machine and whatever that may be. And yes, once you get to a certain pace where you start out riding, your bike that's not, a sport bike or whatever, like, then maybe you're ready for the next step if you want to continue that. But I mean, it definitely is about improvement. I think that's what gets everyone addicted into it. Because, I mean, honestly, yeah, what fun is it riding around the same circle all day, wasting thousands and thousands of dollars if you're not improving yourself?
Right.
I mean, that's all we're out there doing. Like, we're addicted to the improvement. A lot of people, people will say, well, yeah, I don't want speeding tickets, so I go to track and ride. And that is a great way to get your adrenaline out. But I think even those people are addicted to the learning and the constant urge to get better and progress at riding your sport bike. It's so addicting. I've never encountered anything like it, to be honest. But going back to point of what you're riding, I have a buddy of mine that I just did the track day with, and he was on his FZ09 on like regular DOT street tires, and they were pretty chewed up. Like, the tech guys were giving him hell because they're like, those don't look like they're going to last today. Anyways, we rode all day together, and he helped me get my mojo back, actually. But he races. He's a very accomplished rider. And he literally, like, I had to do everything I could do on my sport bike, on slicks, on race tires, may I mind you, just to keep up with him. And he was just throwing it around, on a completely shitty suspension, shitty tires, like, amazing out there. And it really does go to show it's really not the bike, it's the rider.
Yeah.
So you can get a lot out of your machine regardless what it is. I know a lot of guys invest in all these fancy things to add onto their bikes and exhaust and make them quicker. And it's not. None of that is important, which also goes back to why lots of guys track 300s and 400s on the track. I'm friends with several racers that literally can lap me, just painfully lap me, on their 300, and I'm on a 600. And I can't even begin to dream to keep up with them because they don't even break the corner speed that they can carry entering, because their bike is little and agile, and the fact that they're fearless, coupled with that and their skill, they're just sending it around that track way quicker than the rest of us.
Yeah.
So, not sure I answered your question. I think I totally went off on a tangent there. Sorry.
No, it's good. So, I mean, the question was just about, continuous improvement. So I think it was a great answer. I guess the follow on to that is, how much does measurement, play into this? Because the one thing you can do that nobody else can do is precisely measure your progress. Is that a big piece of the experience?
Mm-hmm. I think so. However, I mean, for me, it really translates into, my whole goal is just to be comfortable riding my bike at whatever pace I'm riding it, to be confident in it, that I can get out of a situation. So, for example, on the street, I don't want to ride over 70% of my abilities, right? So how do you figure out what your abilities are to even begin to gauge that? I think track is a perfect place to figure that out, because you learn to know that feeling of, okay, this is what it feels like to be going 100%. What is my brain, thinking, doing? How is it reacting to the surrounding? So when you're on the street, you can tone that back down and be like, okay, this is totally comfortable. Like, I'm still going at, like, let's say a really spirited pace, but I've got so much control still to, if something jumps out at me, if a car comes in my lane, if I come around that blind corner and there's gravel, can I outmaneuver that? That's really all it's about. So riding track will definitely make you a safer rider in the instance that, because you're taught your capabilities You figure out your percentage of your comfort zone and where you have room for error. And you learn your machine and what it can do at a much accelerated level. I know when I did my first ever track day, exactly a year after I started riding, I rode every day on the street. I commuted to work, and then every weekend I went to the mountains and rode and practiced. Everything was practice, practice, practice every day. The thing is, and this is something I learned later on, and a lot of pros will say this, like, just riding around for the sake of getting seat time doesn't do anything for you. For me, it did a little because I wasn't even comfortable being on a bike or, I still had balancing issues. I still was, let me just take this right-hand corner, without falling over type thing. So yes, like I needed the seat time, but it wasn't until I got to track. I did 2 days at Jennings, I believe that was my first time, with full instruction. And it blew my mind because what I learned in that weekend taught me it was more in that weekend than I had learned through the entire year of riding that motorcycle every day by myself, just on the street. So it's I don't know if you had that type of experience because you have been riding for many more years. So I know you managed to learn everything on your own and you were out there way more accomplished than I was going to my first track day. But how did you have anything similar like that? Did you learn something on track that you think you couldn't learn on the street? I'm curious if your experience was similar to mine.
Yeah, I mean, I actually kind of shockingly so. And I think I will go back next year, and I think I will take the very same course, and I will actually pick a bigger bike because I was on a Ninja 400, and I just didn't touch the brakes all day, and I didn't feel like that was as much of a learning experience as I could have. Uh-huh. But that said, I mean, it's a super tight track. It's like 7 turns in 90 seconds kind of thing. But, that said, the very next time I was on a bike, I found myself going deeper into corners. And the thing that's important about that is I'm not performance-oriented. I like to ride with a lot of margin. And what I learned at the track in one day, I stress just one day, what I learned at the track was that I had more than I thought. Or the bike has more than I thought. And that has made me already more assertive, if that makes sense. So therefore safer, just as you say.
Yes, I love it. Everything you just said there, perfect. I love it. And you're right. You made a great point about being more assertive because the bike has so much more. All of our machines are so capable right now. It's mind blowing. So it's all about just learning that machine and seeing how much it has. And that's even on track. That's how I feel. Like sometimes I'm like, I'll be going what I think is my 100%. I remember I was chasing somebody and I was setting them up for a pass out of a corner because I couldn't get them on the brakes. So I was like, well, I was behind them for 2 laps, studying their line. I'm like, okay, I'm stronger than they are coming out of this corner. So let me literally just get right up on their rear and slingshot past them on the exit, right? Well, when we came into a corner, I was so on their rear. And of course, you never want to be right on the tire. You want to be a few inches to either side of it so that if they break, you don't rear end them.
Right.
But regardless, I was still so close that when he tipped in, he slowed down. I was carrying so much more corner speed because I was really excited about wanting to pass him. And I had amped myself up, which by the way, is like the most amazing feeling when you're chasing someone down and you're like, I got this. Like, especially someone that's hard to pass and you're just doing everything you can. And you're like calculating, like, where can I slip by them? And then I got to be in that, how can I get like just a little bit more RPMs out of it so that the bike is revving higher and I got more power, it's all these like little things that you're thinking about, like what to do. But you're working as one unit with the machine. It's the most amazing feeling. anyways, so I come flying in up on him, and he broke harder than I wanted to break. And as I'm already trailing in the corner, I had to get on the brake even more. And I remember that front tire just totally starting to tuck and flexing. And honestly, if it wasn't for the years of experience that I have had on track, I probably would have crashed elsewhere, like on the street. Like, but instinct kicked in, and I was able to modulate still, like stand the bike up some more without hitting him, without tucking the tire, completely recovering and making the pass. Nice. Like it just blew my mind, and I'm like, where did that just come from? Because I don't know what I just did. Like that was full on years of training of things that I have been taught, like what DeSalvo was teaching me, literally came into play. And I was able to, even when I thought I was at my 100%, totally had it. And it's because, well, the bike is way more capable than I am. So that's something I keep forgetting. I'm scared of myself, not that, like, I know the bike and the tires have got me. It's myself that I have to, work on. So
that's interesting. So from a chicken and egg point of view, so I'm still thinking about the sort of novice perspective here. Does doing this kind of riding make you into someone who wants to improve, or does it attract people who already have that drive? Or what was your experience?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think back on all of my experiences and on all of the people that I've gotten into track riding and now that are addicted. And I think mentally you have to be a person that wants to improve, because it is hard work. If you're not naturally gifted and it doesn't come to you, it's definitely hard work. It's exhausting. And then not even just the riding and the training on track, but getting there, you have to have such discipline to want to do it. It takes a lot of effort to, load everything up, like get everything together, get yourself there. It takes a lot of time and money and self-discipline. And then to be there and get the most out of it. I think, at least subconsciously, you have to have some sort of a will to want to be learning something, to get the most out of it. I know for the most part, my friends that have gotten into it and are just as addicted to it as I am. If they didn't have that yearning to learn, they definitely do now, because they're all obsessed about getting better, faster, safer. It's definitely obsessive. So, I think you do need a little bit of discipline to get you there. But it definitely encourages it. Track does encourage that type of mentality to want to get better.
Yeah. And it sounds like a little from column A and a little from column B, because your story certainly speaks to someone who, came with the desire. So, I think that's probably our answer. Look, I struggled. Yeah. I struggled with this next question, because I wish it was something we didn't have to ever talk about anymore. But so bear with me. But I want to believe that in your world, when the visor goes down, all that matters is your lap time, regardless of your gender. Has that actually been your experience? How is the culture of that world in this regard?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot has happened in actually the most recent last few years. When I started riding track in, I guess now it would have been 2012, late 2012, maybe. No, 13. There weren't any females out there on track. I'm trying to think. I think my first track day, there were 2 female racers, like practicing, but I mean, they were racing. They weren't there for fun. Like, there really weren't many women. I started going, and I feel like because I posted so much about it. Like I remember encouraging so many of females that were riding street to try it, and a lot of them did, and they stuck with it. So I think a lot more women have started attending track days, way more than there used to be. Like right now, at any given track day that I go, there's probably 8 to 10 women at track. I mean, that's not a lot considering you can have a track day full of 150 people spread amongst the 3 different groups. So 10 women out of 150 riders doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is. From my perspective, from knowing how few women were riding track just 5 years ago. And for me personally, as a female, it was really intimidating. I still remember my first track day. I was, I think, like one of, actually at the time, I think there was 2 other women there. So that was kind of cool. But, I didn't know them or anything like that. I didn't know anybody. I remember still being in the car driving to track with my husband, and I was nervous as all hell. I mean, I thought I was going to throw up. I was that nervous. That's how much pressure I put on myself. But it did help, obviously, going to track with my husband. So I had somebody, that I could fully rely on there mentally. But it is intimidating when you're like the only female out there around other guys. Initially, and I'll say that initially, because as soon as I figured out what I was doing on my bike and had fun, and I had fun right away, I didn't care. Like, it didn't bother me that I was like the only chick out there or something. I really feel that of all the sports out there, motorcycles are the closest equalizer that you'll get. Maybe not dirt bikes, because you need a lot of physical strength and endurance to ride a dirt bike. While you do need that to ride a sport bike, I feel at a track day level, even club level racing, I feel women are much closer to men in performance in this sport than in many others. It's just, it really is up to the machine and just piloting the machine. You're not lifting it. You're not throwing it. You're just piloting it, which again, does take a tremendous amount of effort, but riding a motorcycle fast and skilled is I want to say it's 70% mental. Like, if you can get your physical self in good shape and to be able to handle that bike at a fast pace, then the rest of it is mental, which I also tend to believe is why there aren't as many female racers. Is I think naturally women have bigger self-preservation. We're not as ballsy. We do not possess, not many of us possess that aggression or that will to fight with the guys for those positions. So I think in that sense, we may have a little bit against us, but again, that's mental. If you really want it as a female, I think you can most certainly get it. I mean, look at Anna Carrasca out there just dominating her class. Patricia Fernandez is another incredible female I look up to, who rides actually my dream bike. She rides a ZX10 on the track, and she destroys. I mean, she's amazing on it. And there's so many others too. It's just, there are women out there that are doing it. I think it's a little harder for women to get into it, though. I will admit we are not taken as seriously, I think, by the industry, but I do think that's changing. I have seen a shift in the last at least couple of years. So I hope that shift keeps changing and in our positive direction. So yeah, I think for the most part, at least like how I ride, what we do, I feel there shouldn't be any issue, like gender shouldn't even be a thing, honestly.
Yeah, right.
We're all riding it for the same reason, because we're having fun.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a pretty positive answer. You know, as I said when I asked the question, I wish it wasn't something we even needed to talk about. But, you know, at the end of the day, I thought I thought it would be disrespectful not to at least touch on it. So I really appreciate the thoughtful answer.
Yeah, no problem.
So you're turning this
problem.
into a bit of a business, I guess, with Red Spade Racing. And there was a phrase on your website that caught my eye, which was promote the sport. And I wonder what you think sport riding, you know, brings to motorcycling as a whole, and who needs to know about it, and who needs to engage, and why. I think you might have just answered that question partly, but I'm curious to know what promoting the sport means to you.
So yeah, that's a very good question. I'm glad you asked it. For me, in going back again, like, because I did start on a sport bike and the stigma that sport bikes had, I felt like nobody knew that sport bike riding could be a sport. Like again, when I tell my coworkers I'm going to track, they have no idea. They don't even know that racing motorcycles exist. They think it's all just hooligan, street riding, wheelies, splitting lanes, scaring car drivers, you know, whatever. Like most people don't know that what racing on a closed circuit is in the United States, because it's not a popular sport here. You know, we're not in Europe, where in Spain, Italy, like that's their sport. This is not. We have motocross. That's like the best, right? So whenever I say track riding, they all think I'm going dirt bike riding. They don't get it.
Right.
So I wanted to change that. I wanted to promote the sport of riding, not so much just street riding, but educate people that, hey, you can take this amazing, powerful machine and actually learn to ride it properly, learn to ride it fast, you know, be aggressive on it in a safe, closed circuit environment. So that, you know, that brings us into racing. And it's just sharing that, like, general knowledge of what riding a sport bike can be, that it's not all just aggressive hooliganism, you know. Like, I want sport bike riders to be respected, because I think it takes a tremendous amount of talent to do what they do. And I want people to see that, you know, to see what I saw when I went to track, and when I saw those guys riding, that blew my mind. Like, I didn't know you could ride a motorcycle like how good those guys were riding it. I was like, what are they doing knee down? Or like, how are they doing that with their rear tires sliding in? Like, you just don't see that on the street, right? Generally. So that was the type of education that I wanted to bring to the table with Red Spade Racing. And of course, with that came, you know, promoting other riders, and sharing their stories. And a while ago, I was interviewing other racers and up and coming racers, and kind of putting their stories out there on my blog, sharing, going to races, photographing them, you know, sharing their photos. I wanted to promote that. And, you know, at the time I was still, and I'm still obviously learning continuously, but at the time I didn't know really anything. And it really helped me grow too as a rider, because I was learning from all of these guys and girls that I was following, and sharing their stories, and literally taking any information I could to help grow myself as a rider. And, you know, always grilling them for information, you know, on what they're doing and why and everything. So, that's kind of where that slogan, why we came up with that slogan, and where it kind of projected, like, what Red Spade Racing kind of was about. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, how could you, I'm just going to let this guy with the lawnmower go by. I can't believe it. These homegrown podcasts are heroic undertakings. So I mentioned earlier that I had my first experience at the track a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, the truth is that I was kind of anxious and I was kind of dumb and slow. But I really had an incredibly good time. It was just a ton of fun. Even though there's just, you know, for a variety of reasons, there's no chance I'm going to turn racing into an obsession, other than to watch it. So I was curious to know, what would you say to people like me? Is it good for the sport to have us out there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I strive to, personally, I try to get as many people to go to track as possible. So, a few years ago, well, let's say a decade ago, maybe a decade to 15 years ago, the only way you could ride track was if you wanted to race. You would have to, sign up, join a racing circuit like WERA or CCS, and get out there and race. There was really no such thing as track days. I think we live in a time where um, businesses that track day organizations came about and are making this open to the general public, just regular people like you and me that don't necessarily have a desire to race, but want to learn about the sport and appreciate their motorcycles, get better at it, be safer, just learn. Like I said, it comes down just to learning. And I think that's great for the sport because it it helps the sport grow. It makes it bigger. It introduces more people to it, and it educates people on what actually goes into the sport. So, good example of this is my brother-in-law, my husband's younger brother. He was actually riding sport bikes way before I even would look at them. And he got into track days probably when track days started coming out, and he was very good at it. And I remember every weekend that MotoGP was on, like we'd be over at his house and he'd be watching racing, whether it was MotoGP or SBK. And I just remember walking by the TV, and I guess at the time I was in my early 20s, or gosh, you know what? Take that back. I was still in high school. It's probably senior year in high school. And I'd be like, this is so boring. Like, I don't like, why are you watching these like motorcycles go around in a circle, like for 20 laps? Like, how is this not boring? And whatever, I'd move on to whatever party or whatever useless crap I was doing back then. And so, it honestly wasn't until I went to track and saw it in person. I think my first race I ever went to was in 2009. It was here at Road Atlanta back when AMA was still running. And I think I remember Matt Mladen won that particular race. And that was the first time that I actually saw like legit racing. And I was like, oh, wow. And it was actually thanks to my brother-in-law who had invited us to go. And I was like, well, this is kind of cool. This is different. And that's what like sparked everything. And then it wasn't until, fast forward several years until I started riding and then started learning racecraft at the track that now I fully and totally appreciate what I see on TV. Just watching the last SBK race this Sunday between who was it, Rhea and oh my gosh, total brain fart. Forgot the other guy's name. Anyways, they were going back and forth for so many laps. Just watching what they were doing and how Rhea was trying to come under him and outpower him, and he couldn't, and just them making the contact on the bike, and then also tire management and all the stuff that's going through their mind when they're racing and dicing it up like that. Holy cow. Like, I was sitting on the edge of my couch, like screaming, where before I'd be like, I don't know what's going on, nor do I care. But that's because I didn't know what went into it. Now that I know just how much effort these guys are putting out and just how much skill they have, because I can like comprehend that now, right? Like, I know where I am and how much effort it's taken me to be here. And they are like way like above somewhere that's like totally unreachable to me. Like, my mind is blown when I see this stuff. So yeah, totally. I think whenever you educate yourself about anything, it's going to help overall, the whole situation. I actually heard a commentary once from somebody that said, oh, well, track days are actually ruining racing and the sport of racing, because now anyone can do it and people aren't investing in racing anymore. They're just going out to have fun and track daying it. And I'm like, nah, no way. I don't believe that one bit. I think there's a huge pull when you start racing. It's still a completely different thing than riding track, just for track day's sake. You know, my husband started racing and he quit riding street, for example. Like it doesn't even compare for him. And the risk versus reward is just not worth it, for example. And I'm finding that a lot with a lot of riders that started riding track and got really into it and then progressed to racing. So I think it's great. And that's the other thing. A lot of the people that I've introduced to track are now racing, are dabbling in it. You know, they're trying it. Some are doing it full season, you know, so they really get into it. And some, like me, just wanted to do it as a bucket list, got into it, did a few, and are still doing it here and there. So yeah, I think it's great.
Good. I'm relieved. So under the heading of continuous improvement, what's next for you? What's driving you? Is there a goal driving you forward right now?
Yes, there is actually. This year, actually, I really wanted to, like I mentioned, I wanted to hit that bucket list and race. I wanted to get my wear license and race a few race weekends at the tracks that I'm half decent at, and can, you know, at least not be a complete rolling chicane for the front runners. But my goal right now is I have to get physically fit to race. And I did that last winter. I was working really hard towards that goal and I was actually succeeding. And it wasn't until I realized, you know, I finally got to a pace where I was being hindered by my lack of physical ability. And I totally understand now why racers train so hard. They cycle, they do all these, you know, things to get strong. You have to have so much strength to muscle that bike around at a faster pace. I can't, you know, to me, it blows my mind how easy it is to ride, let's say, a 1000 cc bike on the street. And then you get on track and you start like pushing it. And it's a beast. It is like, I would never be able to do what I do, like on my 600, for example, on a 1000, like at that level. I mean, like I could probably run its pace because I could be lazy with it because the bike will just pull me out of it, you know, out of a corner, so I don't have to be precise with it. But you still have to have that strength to be able to manhandle it, like when it's at pace. Not sure I'll ever be there at that level, but that's my goal right now, is to get back in shape so that I can regain some of that strength and control and make it easier on myself. And I would I really, really want to finally get that race license next season. Unfortunately, COVID hit, and right when I was going to go do my race school and everything and get my license. So that kind of went sideways, and then, you know, financially and everything. And then I let my health go. So, we'll try again next year. I'm definitely not giving up. That is still my bucket list goal. And, you know, and I'm doing it for myself. Like, I know I'm not going to be competitive. I want to feel that feeling. Like I've had the opportunity to feel what it is like to watch that flag drop and go and compete. And I never thought I was a competitive person till I did like a bunch of mock races. And I'm like, oh man, I'm definitely loving this. So I want to feel that feeling again with the boys this time. Right. I will be scared shitless. But you know what? I want to do it just to prove to myself that I can do it. Like it's definitely like this personal, like, yearning to just prove to myself that I can do it, because it's terrifying to me.
That's a great answer. That sounds like a good strategy for living, actually. In all the senses of that word.
I still have a long ways to go, though. So,
yeah, well, here's to that. Anna, I have just so enjoyed meeting you. I just love your energy around this subject. It kind of makes me want to go back to the track, like right now instead of next year. You're a great ambassador for the sport.
Yay! Do it!
I will. I promise. I promise.
Well, thank you.
It's been a real pleasure. I
feel very honored you say that. Thank you.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. And I will continue to follow your progress with interest. You're an encouraging force for people who are trying to get better at this. So keep at it and ride safe out there.
Well, thank you. That's my goal. I want everyone that, had a yearning or an interest, a little spark, I want them to explore it because it truly is life-changing. For me, motorcycles, I don't say this very often, but learning to ride really gave me a second chance at life. I feel like when it happened in my life, when it did, I was kind of in a bad spot, and it gave me something to focus on. It gave me clarity. It let me find a piece of myself that I never knew existed. And finding that blew my mind. I've become such a different person ever since I started riding. I used to struggle with social anxiety, like really bad. I mean, really bad. We won't get into the details of that, but basically you would have never guessed how I used to be to how I am now. And I feel so grateful for that because so many opportunities missed me by in my younger childhood and in all of my 20s because I was so scared of everything. Motorcycling made me face a lot of fears and put me so out of my comfort zone repeatedly, and it still does repeatedly, that I see how beneficial it was for me. And my story, like what I just said now, is not unique. I hear this from many other women and men alike that also gave motorcycling a chance and it changed their life positively. And I just got to believe that there's something to this. There's probably a reason why my closest, dearest friends ride motorcycles, and why my other friendships with people that don't ride weren't as strong or, came and went. There's something to be said for people that ride. They're of a certain mentality, I think. And I think that's why we all have such a strong community together. I don't know if you experienced it, when your first track day, but I talk a lot about track family and that camaraderie. And there's just something so profound about that, being on track with other people, and you're all putting in 110%. You're all wanting to improve, and you're all at different stages of this goal, right? Of your skill sets and everything. But you're there together and you trust each other as, you're making a pass, at 130 miles an hour, literally 6 inches from each other. Like, that takes trust, knowing that person is, going to hold their line and be there. So again, I think those experiences like really mentally push you and grow you. So that's I think that's why I love it so much. That's why I'm so inspired to keep doing it, and why I want to inspire other people to do it, because it opens your mind.
I have nothing to add to that. That is a beautiful way to end this discussion. Thank you so much. And you're right, you're not alone.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me babble, and it was a pleasure.
The pleasure was mine.
You take care, and hope to see you out on track again.
Count on it. Bye now.
All right. Bye, Bruce.
I listened to all of these interviews to edit out pauses and weird internet noises, and going through this one, I often caught myself smiling. I'd expected to wrap up this examination of sport riding by saying, look, it's all about practice and discipline, and we can all learn from that, and isn't that great? What I wasn't ready for was Anna's sense of joy. She said that doing this gave her a second chance at life, so there's got to be more to it than just a number on a stopwatch. Well, you can't really ever know what's in someone else's heart, but reflecting on my time with Red Spade, here's what I think part of the answer might be. At one point in our conversation, Anna said, we're addicted to the improvement. And it would be easy to dismiss that as simply being about going faster. But what if it's more? What if it's what they call in the Zen tradition, Shoshin, the beginner's mind? Could it be addictive to be an eternal student? To dedicate your life to chasing something that you're never going to catch? Well, apparently yes. And apparently for a very good reason. A scholar in that tradition once wrote, in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. Well, I'm probably getting in over my head here, but that certainly would explain why I enjoyed the track despite being terrible at it. You are, in a way, alone out there, and every lap is a fresh beginning. Every corner is a chance to go where you've never been before. Your motorcycle is still taking you somewhere, but it's somewhere inside you, not in the world. And that road has no end. The horizon is infinite. And so maybe when Anna says riders like her are addicted to improvement, she doesn't mean they're chasing perfection. Maybe what she means is that they're chasing that rush of possibility. That might just be the greatest adventure ride of all. And those leather suits we got to wear, well, they were just a bonus. Thanks for listening. You'll find show notes for this episode at thismotorcyclelife.com. And that's also how you can reach me if you have questions, comments, or suggestions, or if you just want to sign up for my newsletter. thismotorcyclelife@gmail.com works too, and as you can probably tell, I love hearing from you. You can also say hi on Instagram if you like to get your motorcycle fix there. I'm still posting the occasional photo, even with social distancing. And that's also where you can follow many of the people I've spoken to on this podcast, including Red Spade. Although she doesn't know it, I let Anna Rigby pick this episode's playlist recommendation. It's the track from a YouTube video she made called Let Me Take You for a Ride. And it kind of tells you everything you need to know about what's really going on under that helmet at any speed. This mesmerizing track is called Ride, and the artist is rising indie pop star Kappa, who hails from LA via Nashville, which, as you probably know, is just down the road from Deals Gap. Buy it or stream it wherever you like to get your music. And in the meantime, keep staying alive out there.
Baby, when the lights go down, we don't even make a sound. Listen to the silence.